Okay, so here we are. Look, it's the RTÉ Soccer Pod, and this week we're joined by RTÉ Sports' James McMahon, football writer David Sneyd, and former League of Ireland star Conan Byrne. Look, I suppose it's been a busy weekend of a long weekend of fixtures, especially in the League of Ireland Premier Division. James, I suppose we'll start with you. Give us maybe a roundup of how you saw the week, a busy week in Irish football. How did you see it?
It was a week of some change, Ed. A weekend where possibly Derry had the chance to extend their lead at the top of the table, but now there's only 1 point between themselves and Shamrock Rovers. It was a weekend where Shamrock Rovers, I think, showed some form of German efficiency in the way they're playing. You would have to say they were very comfortable winners over St. Pat's on Friday night, and were comfortable enough last night in only winning by 1-0 against Dundalk. Derry have had a bit of a blip. They've had a bit of a wobble. They'll be looking to get back on the bus against the Students on Friday. Bowes got back to some sort of happiness last night with their 4-1 win over Shelburne at Tulka Park. And there was an interesting stat last week, Ed, about Bowes, that prior to the games last week, that if the league table was done on results on 60 minutes, Bohemians would be top. If it was done on results from 60 to 90 minutes, Bohemians would be bottom. So that stat may have changed now on the back of their 4-1 win yesterday. Also as well, Sligo deservedly beat Finn Harps. They've had a bit of a wobble. 3 losses out of 4. Pats left it late to beat the Students, 90th minute goal. And just moving into the first division, it would seem that it's Cork and Galway at the top. Galway had a priceless win over Waterford on Friday. Cork beat Waterford yesterday, and there would seem to be pressure on Ian Morris. So that would be a kind of a recap of the weekend's action in the First and Premier Division. Great stuff, James.
And I suppose I have to I'll go straight to you, David. You were at the game for us on Friday night between Rovers and St. Pat's. Comfortably beaten, as James says. But how do you take that on, David? Were they comfortably beaten?
Yeah, it felt that at the end it was a comfortable 1-0. Like, Pats had a good chance in the first half on Doyle at the back post. But like James was mentioning there, maybe a bit of, what was it, German efficiency. I'd say it was a bit of, this weekend will be summed up by a bit of brilliance from a lad from Ballybock and Ballymun. Just like, if we talk about, like, it's already looking now, it's going to be Rovers and Derry seem to be pulling away now at the top. But if you're looking at 2 players who are beginning to develop a bit more of an understanding, like, you look at that goal that Danny Mandrew scored last night, it was just sensational. Really, just in terms of, like, Conan will appreciate it as well in terms of making those runs. I know he was a bit more central, but knowing when a midfielder has the ball and knowing when to make that run. Like, Danny Mandrew was on his way before Jack Byrne even has the ball under control, because he knows that if he makes the right run, he's going to be found. And Jack Byrne, knowing now, beginning to get that understanding with Danny Mandrew, knowing that he has those runners off him, because that's what he needs, especially as the season goes on. Like, he needs those runners off him because he's capable of finding those passes. But on Friday against Pats, like, I just felt as if Rovers were in kind of third gear a little bit. But the goal they got, Rory Gaffney, like, it just summed it up again, because it was Jack Byrne and Mandrew again. Jack Byrne playing a little slide ball to pick out across, and you just get the feeling that I don't think Rovers are going to be relying on those 2 players as the season goes on, because their squad is just so strong. But in moments and in games when maybe it could be a bit tight, I think those 2 could be the difference as the year maybe than a lot of others in the league, you know.
Great stuff. We'll get to Rovers in a few minutes. Conan, I might just bring you in here in terms of just looking at 2 teams who there was a lot of focus on at the start of the season, with Pats being one of them and I suppose Dundalk being the other. new management, but still with strong squads. And I suppose we're looking at the managers. Are they getting the best out of them, and how are the new managers doing in their roles? A good chunk of the season passed now. We get an idea of where we're at. How do you see the two teams? How would you rate them, I suppose, Conan, both management and the team, and I suppose are they getting the best out of them?
Yeah, look, I think Tim had a bit of a tougher job, if I'm being totally honest. He's come into a squad where, on the back of winning an FAI Cup and finishing second, so there's a lot of expectation there amongst the Pats faithful. But they've lost a lot of players. They've lost Lee Desmond, which has been probably the biggest loss in terms of one player leaving a League of Ireland club. And he's been a big loss at the back. Looking at the game yesterday between UCD and Pats, I really do felt I thought they ran out of ideas, if I'm being totally honest. And it was only when UCD scored that Pats started to up it, and they started to really try and break down the UCD rearguard. And luckily they got the penalty. Obviously Owen Doyle missed it, but Ben McCormick, another up and coming star, with a fantastic finish to make it 1-1, and then just to score the type of goal that Joe Redmond scored, in they're the ones that you need to get over the line at times. And I haven't been mightily impressed with Pats this year, Ed, if I'm being totally honest with you. I wouldn't put it down to Tim. I think when a new manager comes in and new players, likes of Mark Doyle, Owen Doyle, Joe Redmond, who got the winner yesterday, and you're relying on young players as well, like Dara Burns, to come up with key moments in the game. And I suppose that's where if Dara Burns is to improve that little bit more, I'd love to see him in at that back post to score the tap-ins. We know he can score from outside the box with his wonderful finishes. He can dribble, he can create chances for players, but I still think he needs to bring goals to his game. And just being at that back post for crosses from the opposite side, I think he'd score 5 or 6 goals, easy tap-ins every year, but that's not happening for him. With Dundalk, then, I think it was more of definitely more of a transition from an outside point of view for Stephen O'Donnell. He's brought in a lot of players from England and Wales. Nathan Shepherd has been a magnificent signing. Lewis McCarty as well has done really, really well at the back. Thought he should have covered Danny Mandroya's run yesterday, having said that, but that's just small things. So I do think Stephen O'Donnell will get away with a little bit more than Tim, given the fact of the success that St. Pat's had last year. Having said that, I still think they're doing okay. They're sitting in fifth in the league. They're only a point off fourth place Sligo, who, as James said, have only won 3, or have only won 1 in the last 4. So yeah, I still think it's like you're saying, it's a big chunk. A chunk of the season is gone. I really don't think we should be looking at the table until the next round of games finishes, even the third round, and and we'll see how that goes then.
David, let's just come back to you on this, because just get your interest, get your own viewpoint on how it's going, especially Stephen O'Donnell. As you said, as Conan mentioned, you sort of get the idea that it was more of an easier transition with his own history at the club and that sort of thing. Now, up at the game last night at Tala, I spent a lot of time watching Stephen on the sideline. He was very active on the sideline, very much. I don't know if he's still trying to get his point across, or if he's. That's
a polite way of saying it.
Yeah, very much eager to make sure that everyone's doing their job, everyone knows their job. What struck me, I suppose, they did play nice football, but they were sort of lacking that man in the middle of the park. I suppose someone like himself who would control the game for you. What do you think, David, in terms of what? Like, he looks as though he's working from the back to the front in that sense. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on. And like, you can only, I suppose, if you're looking at it from O'Donnell's point of view, if you look at the body of work he's had so far, you can only really go off Pat's, because obviously that was the first job. I do think there's a lot of similarities in the sense that, like, with Pat's when he took over, like, he got them solid. Like, he also got a couple of yellow cards on the touchline, just in terms of he was very energetic on the touchline. But it does seem as if he comes in and he builds from the back up, which I think is the right way to do it. Because if you look at, I can't remember the exact stat now, but like, they struggled for goals big time in that first year under Steve. And even when he came in towards the back end of the season, when he got the job after taking over from Harry Kenny, it took a while to get going. And it strikes me is that it's the similar pattern with Dundalk, where like they've had a fair few clean sheets. I think like 6 or 7 clean sheets. They've only conceded up until the other night. He had only conceded a couple of goals in about 7 or 8 games, and they were penalties. And it just strikes me, like you mentioned there about having that player in the middle of the park. Like I thought with Pats, things really kicked on because of Alfie Lewis. Like I thought Alfie Lewis was sensational. Like Conan he touched on it. That's probably part of the struggles that Pats are going under now, because maybe they haven't got that Alfie Lewis type figure where they're then able to get, say, Chris Foster up the pitch. And I think with Dundalk, that's maybe what they're going through now a little bit, where it's building blocks. And it's a smart way of doing it, I suppose. It get everyone kind of solid, get your shape right, know what you have to do in terms of not conceding, because he's probably understood that they needed to have that because they weren't going to be hitting the ground running. So like I would be of the opinion, I think Dundalk will get stronger as this season goes on, because if you look at it as well, what happened with O'Donnell with Pats, obviously he came in towards the back end of the season, then he had a COVID hit season where it was reduced, and it was only really that first full season last year where you really saw just the progression. And now I think it's a bit too much to be saying that they'll challenge possibly Rovers and Derry. My own instinct on it would be, I think Rovers, as the season goes on, could just be far too strong just in terms of strength and depth. But I would say the signs so far, if you're a Dundalk fan, you can see the work that O'Donnell is doing, and you already have an idea of the caliber of what he's capable of because he's what has shown us, Pat. So I think if they have a strong finish, maybe do well in the cup, I think it bodes. Not that you can already write a season off, but you can already see that come next year when there's more investment in the team as well, that he'll definitely have Dundalk up there challenging 100%.
Great stuff. And look, moving on, Conan, you were up in Draw had a match last night against Derry, and a great result for the home side. But looking at Derry, I suppose specifically, a disappointing Easter weekend for them. Seeing that they're comfortable lead at the top being almost wiped out. Conan, what do you make of their performance over the 2 games? They will be disappointed at the end of it, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Friday was a big one for them, Ed, considering the fact that when they got the second goal, it was chalked off for offside. And I think that's the difference between Brendan Clark and Lewis Webb. If you had noticed the goal that McJanet scored up in the Roy McBride Brandywell Stadium on Friday night to put them 2-1 ahead, you could see Brendan Clark throwing his arms up into the air, jumping around. Linesman put up his flag. Referee didn't consult his linesman, and the referee, and it was chalked off for offside. I don't think any other goalkeeper in the league would be doing what Brendan was doing. It just shows his massive experience that he has within the league. And the goal should have been given, because McGonigal, where he was standing, wasn't in the line of sight of Brendan Clark in the Shelbourne goal. Now you could turn that around and say Akintunde handled the ball for his strike in the first half. So it's a kind of case of two potential huge goal opportunities. But yeah, he'll be disappointed with the manner of the defeat on Friday. Brian McManus comes in and has a wonderful strike at Gartside. He didn't move his feet at all for the strike, and if he did, I think he would have saved it. And obviously I was ahead in the game park there last night, and again they went 1-0 up, and they really should have went 2-0 up. Akintunde had another wonderful chance to score, and I was really, really impressed with James yesterday in the game. His link-up play, his hold-up play, his strength, his awareness for the pass. But the one thing he lacks is goals. He doesn't score enough goals for a striker, and that's really, really it's really hitting Derry. And with McGonigal on the bench, you had Matty Smith up front, who obviously hasn't started the season because of injury, and he's only trying to get in now. So there wasn't goals in that Derry City lineup last night. Took a shot from outside the box by Joe Thompson to put them in the lead. And as I said, if Akintunde had scored that chance to make it 2-0, I think it would have been game over. But in fairness to Drogheda, I thought they were excellent, especially in the second half. Gary Deegan was, you could hear him from the 4 corners of the ground, dictating play, telling people where they should be. And that's what you need. You need leaders in a team, especially like Drogheda, where they're going to be down in around 6th to 7th, 8th position in the table, to try and push them up the league. And I thought it was a really good performance. And Ryan Brennan making his first start of the season as well with another goal. And again, you're looking at Shelburne and you're wondering why you're letting go of someone of Ryan's experience and goals. Draw to take him, and already he's got 2 for them, and he'll score a lot more for them as well. So Derry will be very disappointed, but as James said, they have UCD this weekend, so it's going to be a big game for them because they'll really need to take the 3 points.
Great stuff. And I suppose now everyone's watching Rovers. They've come into 2 tough games the weekend, and they've come out of it unscathed. They've come out with 6 points, and not only that, they've also come out of it with a team that's starting to look as though they're starting to click. Every game, I suppose, you want someone to stand up and take the game by the scruff of the neck. And last night it seemed to be Danny Mandrow who looked sharp from the opening minutes, while others were a little bit. Even Jack Byrne took his time to get into the game. Some of his passes weren't finding their targets. And then, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, the second half, the 2 of them combined, and that relationship is really starting to build. But also you've got players like Neil Farrugia coming on, looking totally at ease and comfortable in that position, and showing the competition that's there for Rovers and the strength in depth. So David, you spoke earlier in terms of you think it's going to be Rovers Derry. Do you think Derry will have the capacity to sort of to match Rovers for the next round of games at least?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, already shown in the 4th round of fixtures, especially, like, they've shown that they are more than capable of winning games in different ways. Like they've got a bit of flair about them, obviously, like wheel patching and all the rest of it, but they can also grind it out a little bit too. It's just like, obviously, some of the injuries they've already had, like Michael Duffy, obviously, which would be a big one, because you're looking at it in terms of a game changer and a winner. That's someone who can pull something out of nothing. He's going to be a big loss. Obviously, Patrick McElhenney hasn't really got going. Like, yeah, like I sort of watched Derry against Shelburne earlier on in the season, and I'd say the most impressive player on the pitch was actually Brandon Kavanagh. Like, he was really, really good. Like a player, and if you look at it, slight tangent, but if you look at it from a manager, especially like in any league, but like sometimes you need to see something in a player. Like, obviously he has a lot of talent, but Rudy Higgins clearly sees something with him, and he was just very, very sharp and very, very just direct and positive. And if he can maintain that as the season goes on, that kind of stuff, I don't know, I just think that kind of like filters around a little bit as well. Like, listen, Colin's far better placed to talk about what that can be like in terms of when you can get a feeling amongst a new group of players and when things begin to kind of, I don't know, click for a team. But I think, and to be honest, I hope that Derry can, because we've seen about it. You be honest, like, the best team deserves to go on and win the league, but you want to see a proper challenge. You want to see a team properly put it up to Rovers and bring more out of them, because you kind of get that sense that, like, there's so much in that Rovers team, and if they are challenged properly, you want to see them, you want to see it brought out of them. Like you mentioned Mandreou there again, like you kind of forget, like, Stephen Kenny's already had him in around that Ireland setup for the training camp last summer. Like, he's a player he wanted to have a look at. And it's a player who kind of, we continually talk about, well, he just needs to have that focus. It's almost as if that's the narrative that's around Mandreou, is he has to have that focus about football, because he's got so much ability, and he really does. Like, and that's a player who you could be looking at, I think, and is that someone, we talk about Jack Byrne, but is that someone who would have a future again playing for Ireland? You forget, like, I know kind of, we're talking about like Derry as well, but you kind of forget as well we're talking about Mandreou. Like, when he was at Brighton, I remember doing an article with him a few years ago, like, Brighton wanted to keep him. He was the one who forced his release to get out of Brighton, because he wasn't ready for the rigors of what professional football was. And he seems to be getting that now at Rovers. And if you look at what Derry are doing, I would say with Rudy Higgins, like, he's trying to, you almost get that sense that he's getting that out now of wheel patching, where Will Patching spoke about very honestly there in an article with the 42. He did a piece with Paul Fennessy. It was very good, talking about how he'd been in that system with Manchester City from such a young age. Then he goes down the leagues to Notts County, and it's a move that just doesn't work out for him. And even at Dundalk, it just didn't really work. But he's someone at Derry now who is beginning to flourish a little bit. And that comes obviously from a manager who has so much faith in him. So if we're talking about if Derry can put it up to Rovers properly this season, Will Patching is obviously going to have to be absolutely instrumental. And there could be a little subplot there in terms of how he does, the likes of Mondrayo, even Jack Byrne, because it just you see it, there's these talented players who are in the league and can make those difference, and it's just going to be very, 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 very interesting just to see how that little rivalry, I suppose, develops as the season goes on, because hopefully they will be the two sides challenging neck and neck for that title for right up until the end of the season.
Nice one. Yeah, I suppose just in terms of the weekend, the long weekend, and just in terms of two other teams, James, that were maybe coming in probably unnecessarily and a bit unfairly coming in under a bit of pressure with Bohemians and Sligo. James, there was talk of both managers being under pressure, but both managers obviously come out with good results on Monday. So you'd imagine, and they're both very well placed in the league table. I don't see where the pressure was necessarily coming from. But what do you think? It was a good day yesterday for both managers, James.
Yeah, certainly a good day for Keith Long, and I think he spoke afterwards about them converting the chances that was coming their way and things clicking for them, and things did click yesterday on the back of their 4-1 win. I think people giving out or maybe questioning Keith Long is a bit silly. I mean, what he's done over the past 3 or 4 years at Bohs has been quite remarkable. Between the turnover of players at that club, getting them into Europe last season and playing some really nice football in Europe. And people must remember the football that they did play at the Aviva in those games. Switching to Liam Buckley, you were talking earlier about managers being animated on the sideline. Liam Buckley never seems to get animated on the sideline. Any time I've watched him, and perhaps maybe it might be any harm if he was a little bit more animated. Speaking to a few people up in Sligo, I think there are a couple of rumbles about Liam's position. I don't think they're loud rumbles or anything like that, but I'm not sure whether all the supporters are happy. But this is a crucial couple of weeks now coming up for Sligo, because last season, I think on the 24th of May, Sligo were top of the table. I think they beat Shamrock Rovers 1-0 in Tala that night. And after that, then they went into a bit of a slump, and their performance in Europe against that Icelandic team was quite tepid. Yesterday, they got a vital win against Finn Harps. It just gets them back on track again. I mean, they are 4th in the table. They've got a home game against Drogheda on Saturday night, and then they've got a home game against Shamrock Rovers coming up on Friday week. So I think there will be a little bit of pressure going forward on Buckley, because with Europe coming as well come June, July, the expectation is this year that hopefully Sligo will get past that first round in Europe, and advance in the competition. I think the injury to Keena possibly hasn't helped them either, and Greg Bulger being out as well. But there is one player, and you're talking about players maybe having a sniff around the Irish camp. I think Ed McGinty in the Sligo Rovers goal has been excellent all season. You know what I mean? I think he is one of the players of the season so far, and possibly maybe in the next couple of months, there is a chance that he could be on the move. But to answer your question, Ed, I mean, I think Keith Long, first of all, I think is doing an excellent job at Bohs, but another acid test will come on Friday night with that clash against their old rivals at Dalymount.
Yeah, absolutely. And Stephen Kenny's spoken about Ed McGinty before, and he's very aware of him. And so as is Jim Crawford in the under-21s. But speaking of Liam Buckley, Conan, you know the man very well. What do you make of James's assessment? And I imagine he had his animation moments when
maybe has.
And looking from afar, how do you think he's getting on at Sligo? He's there he's there long enough to have made a mark, I suppose.
Yeah, those animations were few and far between, let me tell you. He was always a glass half full type of person. Even if we were 3-0 down at half time, he always felt that we'd come back and win 4-3. So, but yeah, look, I don't mean to put, I just think Sligo are in a false position for the players that they have in their dressing room. They went top of the league, and everyone is thinking that, yes, Sligo's the year, Sligo are going to compete. I really never thought that they would. And just let me just go through the team for a minute just to explain my reasoning behind that. I think they've signed Will Fitzgerald from Derry City, who wasn't getting a game. They signed Carlo Sullivan from Finn Harps. Both of them are regulars and doing really, really well in the Sligo team because they suit Liam's style of play. They signed Aidan Keena from a League One team in Scotland who wasn't scoring many goals. They brought him in and he's doing particularly well. They brought in Paddy Kirk from Longford Town. I'm not saying that these players aren't good enough, but these aren't players that have won anything or have been close to winning anything. So it's very difficult to throw them into a side that can go on then and compete at the top end of the Premier Division. Now, yes, they do have, the recruitment has been very, very good. Signing Nando Peinecker, he's been an absolutely superb signing. Jordan Hamilton, he just seems to fade in games. He starts really, really well. Brilliant left foot in him. Great in that, again, in Liam's team in that 10 position. And also Max Sneyd is scoring a few goals as well recently. But to suggest that they should be challenging at the top and for Liam's job to be under pressure because of that, I think is bizarre. I think they're getting, there's talk about budgets as well. The thing with Sligo, Ed, is that players don't want to go there. And it's, I know personally four or five players that were asked to go down that Liam tried to sign, and they didn't want to go down to Sligo, so they went to somewhere else. They went to Dublin clubs or up to Derry City. So that's the problem that you have down the west coast of Ireland, like the likes of Galway as well, and Cork City. Reading John Caulfield's book, he had the same problem trying to get players down to Cork. So it's not just about not signing players. It's trying to entice them to that part of the country, which is proving difficult for not just Liam, but a lot of managers down the west coast.
Yeah, Conan, and also as well, Conan, sorry to cut in you, like back in the day, like with clubs like Sligo and Galway, all the bulk of their players were Dublin based. So like you had players coming up and down from Dublin, and that really wasn't ideal going forward either.
Hey, Conan, I was just going to say, just pick up on that point. It's a shame to hear that about players that wanting to go to Sligo, because Sligo is almost unique in the country that when you walk around Sligo town, it's a football town, it's a one club town, and it's Rovers. It's Rovers in Sligo, and it's a place where players would actually get adulation and recognition, and players don't realise that, because anyone who has gone down, like players like Danny Norton, stuff like that, who've gone over there and settled, and really become part of the community, and it is a great football place. So that's a shame to hear that.
And on that as well, Anthony Elding still lives in the town, obviously FAI Cup winner, and it's interesting. He actually did. Johnny Kenny was doing one-on-one sessions with Anthony Elding in a park in Sligo because they live near each other. I remember speaking to Johnny before he went over and signed for Celtic, and he was explaining how like he would see Anthony Elding around the place, and Anthony Elding does a bit of coaching around the town apparently now still, but the two of them would work together. And even on the point that Conan was making, it's so true. Like there is a few bob in Sligo. Obviously, it's renowned about the kind of fundraising that goes on there, but also because of the European run and the money that's there now as well. Like Liam tried to sign Jack Byrne before he came back. Like spoke to Jack before the season, and they had a conversation about going there because he felt, like everyone thought it was a foregone conclusion that he would end up back at Rovers. And obviously, like the relationship he has with Stephen Bradley and all the rest of it, and the fact that he was there previously, you could see it was a perfect fit. But like even Jack Byrne saying that, like when someone like Liam Buckley was getting in touch, he said he felt he owed it to him to at least listen to him, what he was offering and what he wanted to do. But ultimately, it was a case if he wanted to remain in Dublin. I was saying it's just another example where that's the kind of caliber of player that Liam Buckley was trying to get in at the start of the season and how he was trying to challenge. But ultimately, I don't think it was just the case if he didn't want to go to Sligo, because obviously Rovers, he just felt Rovers was a better fit. But it is just another challenge that sometimes like a club like Sligo has to deal with.
Conan, did you want to quickly reply to that? Because I just want to move on to chat about Shelbourne. But
yeah, I just think it's an important point as well that the way Liam plays his football, it's on the ground, and the Sligo Rovers pitch hasn't been up to scratch at all. It's been absolutely horrendous, being completely honest. And it's no surprise that they only picked up 1 point from 9 in their last 3 home games as well, because that's the way Liam plays. And talking about as well, James' point about the lads coming from down from Dublin, I think I was talking to Conor O'Grady last week, and the academy director down in Sligo, and there's a lot of up and coming players coming up through the Sligo ranks, and it's important now that they try and get through into that first team to create that bit of local aspect to the club. I think that's very, very important.
Well, and I suppose one thing that Liam Buckley did was he moved himself down to Sligo, which would have been very, very well received down in those parts. But speaking about other managers who are in profile. You know, everyone's joking about Damien Duff's Shelbourne this year, but obviously the fact that he's there at Shelbourne is bringing a lot of attention, and rightly so. But he must have had such a crazy weekend, Conan. Just I'll stay with you here on it. To get the result he did on Friday and then to come crashing back down to earth on Monday, it sort of shows that the job's still very much a work in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, Ed. The problem with Shelbourne is that they're conceding the same type of goal over and over again. And I think I counted, I could be more, but I've counted at least 7 goals where Shelbourne have had possession of the ball in their own half, lost it. The connectivity around the back three hasn't been good enough. The opposition team breaks and they score. And that's the frustrating part. And I noticed Damien Duff, even obviously he realised that. I'm not stupid enough to think that he doesn't. But he mentioned it in his post-match interview after the game yesterday, that they're conceding the same types of goals, but yet it's still happening. And I think other managers are starting to realise this. So let's just, I'd say if I was a manager or a coach of an opposition team, I'd sit back, I'd let the back three of Shelbourne have it, and once it goes into any player in that midfield, I'd be pressing like mad to win the ball back, because 7 goals already, and there's been about 4 or 5 set pieces as well. No team have broken down Shelbourne by one touch play and getting a ball into the box and a header and a goal. It hasn't happened like that. So they're working really hard. The back three are doing really, really well. But it's their Achilles heel at the moment, Ed, is that losing the ball in that central midfield position, and the team's breaking away and scoring. They're not scoring enough themselves. Their away form has been absolutely superb. Obviously, the win in Derry was magnificent, and their home form has been really poor. And they're going to have to look at that really much, very much so. And I think they need to bring in a goal scoring threat as well, because they don't score enough goals at the top end of the pitch.
Yeah, David, I suppose just pick up on that point with Conan, the defensive frailties. And I remember the opening game of the season, Pats had a couple of chances within the first 5 minutes. The defence were all over the place, but like Joey O'Brien is there to help Damien. You'd imagine that would have been a very focused area. So maybe it's just it's taking time to get going. Would that be, or is it really that frail?
Do you know, it's just basic mistakes. I don't think it's just simple, very, very simple stuff. Like Conan mentioned it there. Like I was at the match. I was actually at that first game of the season against Pats when it was just a square ball across the midfield. And in fairness, Darragh Burns in that game still had a lot to do. It was a world-class goal where he cut in. But like yesterday, like you could sense the frustration on the touchline with Joey O'Brien and Damien Duff. Like you were being polite earlier about Stephen O'Donnell on the touchline. Let's just say the two lads were vocal on the touchline, and I can only imagine what they were like in the dressing room. But like I was speaking to Duff after the game yesterday, and he held his hands up a little bit, and because he made the point, he said, "Listen, the goals are coming from when we're trying to build a play." So he says, maybe we're the ones who are actually giving the players the wrong information here, in terms of how they're set up and what they're asking them to do, and like it's a point maybe. Would they possibly be mixing things up a little bit now in terms of how they are building up? Because like yesterday, the goals were appalling. They really were. Like Shane Griffin giving a 10 pass out in such a vulnerable position, straight away lean boards onto the ball, and he still has a bit to do, and he still gets a bit fortunate, but they're punished. The third goal as well. The fourth goal was horrific too. JJ Lunny giving that pass out and then just easily intercepted. But then it's still, Liam Bourke still has a bit to do. Like he goes around JJ Lunny, who was only on the pitch a couple of minutes, but it looked as if Lunny was the one who'd been like trudging about for about an hour because he just had no legs. Like Bourke went around him as if he wasn't there. And then he still done well to kind of cut through the defence. And then there was a bit of luck with the rebound falling to Junior. But the third goal, I thought was interesting because moments before it came, Junior had been put in down that side as well, got down on the right side of where the back three would be for Shells, and fired a shot across goal, went a little bit wide, but he hadn't learned that lesson. A few moments later, there's one simple pass through again, and then Chris Twardick actually has a bit of composure, cuts inside and scores. And that would be the killer for Shelbourne, because they've done well. Like Sean Boyd's got a great goal to get them back into the game. They got themselves back into a position where, and maybe it could just be to do with an overhaul of players and a new team. Still, you mentioned it there, taking a bit of time to gel, but they got themselves into a position where they were beginning to actually look a bit strong in the game, but they weren't able to kick on, and they weren't able to manage the game a little bit and like have maintained that superiority. Like Bohs bit by bit edged themselves back in, and like even for Bohs who've conceded 3 goals after the last, well, 3 goals in the last 4 games after the 88th minute to give away points. I think once they got that third goal, you could just sense the kind of the belief sap out of Shells a little bit, because they did really struggle when the onus was on them to build up and kind of just create from, say, going back into the midfield and obviously into the final third. They just struggled. They really did. And I think they have to try and adapt a little bit to mix things up, especially at home, because the longer it goes on without a win, it'll build and build. Like Duff made the point that he actually had them training at Talca Park the day before the game yesterday, because he wanted to get them back onto the pitch and have a bit of fun and get a bit of like release a bit of the tension, because he felt as if they've been trying too hard. So like they're away, isn't it? They're away to Dundalk on Friday, but and you wouldn't put it past them to go there and get a result. But even just to maintain that little bit of positivity that has been building, because the crowd at Talca Park was great yesterday, they just need to kind of get a win soon and just to get that monkey off our back a little bit.
I suppose Conan, just in terms of following on to that point, and what something that might take a bit of pressure off the likes of Duff and at Drogheda are the fact that UCD are already 8 points down off safety. Finn Harps are now 5 points away from Shelbourne. So there's a chance by halfway through the season, unlike last season where that promotion playoff place was still being fought for. There's a chance that some teams might be able to ease off in the second half of the season if current form continues, with Finn Harp struggling and UCD looking like the Longford of last year.
Yeah, I think Drogheda will be okay. As I said, I've seen them a couple of times this season, and they have a lot of leaders in their dressing room that will get them through games. Like yesterday, for instance, with the likes of Gary Deegan, Ryan Brennan, Georgie Poynton came on as well. These are leaders that you need in your dressing room. And I mentioned that Bowles, I felt hadn't really had that this season at all. But yeah, like you look at UCD, and I think we've all said it that we felt that they'd finish bottom. It's looking that way at the moment. Conceding 2 penalties this weekend as well hasn't helped the situation. Going 1-0 up against Pats, it's all about trying to hold on to the 3 points, and at least one when you score with 20 minutes to go against St. Pat's, and that wasn't to be. But on UCD, I'm fascinated by their front three. Ed, if I'm being totally honest, I think if you put their front three in nearly every other Premier Division side, you're going to do very, very well. I think Dylan Duffy has been absolutely brilliant down the left-hand side for UCD. We all know about Liam Kerrigan and Colin Whelan as well. And obviously they're going to leave in the summer. Well, Kerrigan and Whelan are, because they're finished their studies in UCD and they have to go. So it'll be interesting to see who's going to come in to try and take the mantle from those 2 players, because they are big losses to them. With Finn Harps, I was so impressed with them at Talca Park a couple of weeks ago when they defeated Shelbourne. They were really, really good. They had 2 or 3 chances off the woodwork as well, and 3 good goals from their point of view. And I've been disappointed that they didn't push on from that. But I'm not going to say I'm going to worry about Shelbourne. I won't. They need to eradicate those simple errors that are causing all those goals. And if they do, they'll be fine. I don't know whether it's a case of that it's the players themselves in that central position aren't good enough, or is it a case they're taking too many touches on it, which I feel that 1 or 2 of them are in that position. They should be aware of their surroundings, and 1 touch passing in around that centre of the park to try and get themselves up the pitch quicker would be more ideal than trying to hold on to it and use their strength to get away from other players, which obviously isn't working for them. So yeah, it's back to the drawing board for Damien in that regard. But I still like the way that he still has his the way of playing. People might call it naive, but I think that if you have a philosophy, you stick to it. And that's exactly what he's doing. And it could be just the fact that the personnel in there that are giving the ball away aren't up to it.
And look, I suppose teams who are probably eyeing that spot, maybe 2 spots in the Premier Division next season, those front runners in the First Division. James, we had a quick chat about the First Division earlier, but just in terms of one thing that disappointed me yesterday, and it highlights the fact that it's a 9-team league, was that Galway weren't playing, and you sort of wanted to see how, if they could match Cork City's performance and result and stay, stay neck and neck with it. But it's turned out to be a good battle there, James. And not only that, teams like Longford have games in hand. Waterford, do you expect still to have a say in it as well?
And also as well, Treaty are up there as well. So it's very fascinating. I always think, Ed, I have a problem with odd-numbered team leagues. I mean, surely could we get a Kerry team or a Castlebar team or somebody into the league there to even things up? Galway on Friday night, they went down to Waterford. I spoke earlier about German efficiency. I think they were quite efficient in grinding out a 1-0 win. And likewise, Cork got the better of Waterford yesterday, 2-1. So at this juncture, it would seem to be between them two, Cork and Galway, as to who's going to top the league. But is it down to 5th or 6th in the first division that could end up in a playoff, at the end of the season? So there's still an awful lot to play for. I would even say, to exclude Cove and Athlone out of it, there's, I'd say, for the 7 teams there, obviously the top 2, but there's 5 other teams that could be fighting for those playoff spots. But the interesting thing would be the fact that Waterford's form hasn't been great of late, and there's perhaps some rumblings as to whether Ian Morris, not that he's going to get the boot or anything, but he's probably under a little bit of pressure at the moment.
Well, one team, I suppose, over the last 7 days, it really caught the imagination, were the women's national team, and an amazing performance and result over in Sweden. What did you make from the game at the international game? Did you get to see it? And do you think Vera Pauw needs the National League teams to be producing at least the squad players for her?
Yeah, look, I watched it with my 2 girls. They're keen footballers themselves. So I thought it was a heroic performance, especially from Chloe Mustaki, if I'm being totally honest, given her history of injury and illness as well, to come into a game, first competitive game like that, and to perform the way she did. I thought it was absolutely extraordinary. Thought Katie McCabe, Denise O'Sullivan as usual were very, very good, but Ruisha Littlejohn in the centre of the park, I thought was the unsung hero. I thought she was absolutely magnificent in the game, just sitting in front of the back 3, and was absolutely excellent, mopping up the play whenever she could, because she was up against some absolute stars in Black Stenius as well, who was a threat all game. But the most important thing to take from this now, Ed, is that they go into the Finland game and get a positive result. They need to now, because after the performance in Sweden, it's such a heroic performance that it was, that it'll mean nothing if they don't go on now to defeat Finland in the next game. And I know that people are talking about opening the Aviva and stuff for that. I'd run a mile from it, Ed, being totally honest. They've created this atmosphere and surroundings at Tallaght Stadium and captured the imagination of thousands of young girls, and the camaraderie they have with them after games in Tallaght Stadium is huge, and it needs to be kept in Tallaght with the atmosphere that's created there. The Aviva Stadium is 17,500 in that lower bowl, and would we get 17,500? Being honest, I don't think we would. We've only had over 5,000 twice at women's international games ever. And I think if we pack out Tallaght, make it a cauldron of noise, the atmosphere will be incredible, and who knows what we can do. But I think a positive result against Finland is a must now after the draw last week in Sweden.
So we might just run through the Women's National League results. James, do you have them handy there?
Weekend gone by, the games at Lone Town, the leaders Peamount won away, or the joint leaders Peamount won away 2-1 at Athlone. Wexford had 5-1 winners over Cork. Scoreless between Bohemians and DLR Waves. Shelburne joint leaders had a 2-0 win away to Galway, and Sligo up to 4th in the table after their 3-1 win at home against Treaty.
Great stuff. Let's just cross the water for a moment. Big weekend in England with the FA Cup semi-finals taking place. I suppose from Liverpool and Manchester City's point of view, probably the lesser of the 3 things that they're putting their focus on. Especially with I think the FA Cup final falls a week before the Premier League finishes up this year.
Correct,
so
yeah.
Can't be ideal for Premier League chasing teams like Liverpool and Man City. Conan, would you think Man City are not too disappointed to exit the competition and put the focus on, I suppose, what would be a great double?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think we knew that from the starting 11 that Pep put out. Having Stefan in goal and obviously Zinchenko as well. I think Liverpool focused in on Zinchenko more so than anything else. I thought the high press down Man City's left-hand side was particularly noticeable throughout the game. They didn't let... I don't know. The thing is, I don't know whether it was a case of letting the ball go over. They didn't want Alexander-Arnold getting 1v1 against whoever, Grealish or Foden, whoever was on that side. They just I think the focus was to try and pin them in that left full position so that he wouldn't be exposed, because against Man City, obviously they focused on that right back area with Milner last year, and then obviously with Alexander-Arnold at the Etihad. So I really enjoyed the tactical battle. I know Lisa Fallon was on this show last week and was talking about the tactical battle between Pep and Klopp. But I think Klopp certainly came out on top on Saturday, and it was a magnificent tactical performance, especially in the first half from Klopp. But I think with the formation and the team setup that Man City put out, I think Johnny Giles was right in saying that the eyes were elsewhere for Pep. I think the Champions League is the holy grail now for Manchester City, and I think that's where the pressure will be, and let's see what happens.
I suppose we need to mention you the semi-final, David. In terms of one thing that's impressed me recently for a club like Chelsea, who've been under pressure for various amounts of reasons, without having too much sympathy for them, I was very impressed with the reaction that Thomas Tuchel has shown since that game against Madrid, where they were well beaten in the first leg. He called his team to a meeting. He took them to task, and I think they came out in the weekend in the Premier League. They annihilated a team. I can't remember which team it was.
Southampton 60.
Then they came out again, and then they took Madrid on in the second leg, and he saw a much better version of them. And I suppose they got a bit of a reward there at the weekend to qualify, get into the FA Cup final. What do you make of their chances?
I suppose you have to give it up to the plucky underdogs, Chelsea. Fair play to them.
Yeah.
So well. No, do you know what? Right, if you look at Tuchel, if you go back to the start of the season, first of all, their chances, they're well capable, obviously, of winning the FA Cup and beating Liverpool, of course. But I think Tuchel, we hear so much about kind of say modern coaching, and it's clear he's a fantastic coach. But I think as a manager and understanding situations and being firm, but also being right and correct from the start of this season, with how he dealt with all that Lukaku stuff early on in the year and keeping the show on the road, like a weaker manager that could have led to a dressing room, I don't know, bit of mutiny perhaps, or it could have given a lot of players a lot of reasons to not reach the levels that they did. And don't get me wrong, they had a little bit of a blip around Christmas time, I think it was. Any other year, any other time of football, you're going to maybe drop back. Just the levels that City and Liverpool are at, basically that put paid to them being in the title race, because it looked as if that was going to be capable. But Tuchel has proven, and I think as much as being an excellent coach like Klopp and Guardiola, his management and his man management of situations and how he deals with getting certain messages out there, like what he said after the Real game, and people were having a pop at him in the media when he said the toy was dead, and clearly he's not going to be giving that same information to the players. There's no way he was. You look at the performance they put in against Real Madrid and how close they came, and what a just fantastic game that was. But I think as a manager, people would have looked at him and how he managed things at PSG before he came in, and how difficult the scenario that is, and clearly had something about him. But I think a lot of people would say as a manager, he's really shown, not just as a coach, but he's such a top class manager and could go into any situation. They were talking about, looks as if Man United are going to obviously go for Erik ten Hag, and there's a lot of debate about, well, is he a great manager or is he just one of those coaches who can work brilliantly within a certain framework? But you look at Tuchel now, and I think proven he's already won the European Cup. It's the trophy obviously that Man City want more than any other, because that's why they got Guardiola. But he is in that bracket, and it'll be interesting to see what does happen at Chelsea in terms of who the preferred bidder becomes and what happens. And you would expect, and I could be wrong, but there's bound to be a certain element of destabilization coming out at Chelsea because of obviously the Roman Abramovich years. Everything was pretty much like, even though like managers would change, that foundation was in place. It's going to be different now, and it'd be very interesting to see where Tuchel goes, because like I just admiration for him as a manager, and like especially that sort of, but labouring the point, but how we dealt with that Lukaku scenario was just, I thought, top class. Really, really good.
Certainly is. I suppose, look, we're just coming to wind it down here, and we have just enough time to have a quick look at the Premier Division fixtures for the week ahead. We've got obviously the big game up in Dalymount Park, Bohemians against Shamrock Rovers. Derry City, as we mentioned before, have a relatively straightforward task, you'd imagine, against UCD at home. St. Pat's take on another struggling side, Finn Harps, while Dundalk will take on Shelbourne up in Oriel Park. The Saturday game sees Sligo take on Drogheda. Conan, what's your standout game, and what are you looking forward to this weekend?
I suppose the Dublin Derby is the Dublin Derby. There's all Dublin Derbies every week, but Bohs Rovers obviously is a big one, considering how after the fantastic performance yesterday, and Keith Long speaking about that he felt that this was coming, given the fact that the concession of late goals. Defensively, it has to be looked at. You know, I think Rory Feely needed a break yesterday, if I was being totally honest. He's been at fault for 3 or 4 goals over the last number of weeks. I don't like singling out players, but I think that he's been particularly poor in certain games and in certain late stages of those games as well. And he obviously gave him a rest yesterday, and they got a 4-1 win. So I don't know if he'll start on Friday. Rovers, on the other hand, 2 1-0 consecutive 1-0 home victories. Their third 1-0 home victory of the season as well. So they're really, really impressive, and I'm glad David noticed it earlier on. I think everyone was admiring Jack Byrne's pass, but the run from Danny Mandroyo was absolutely sensational, because he went so early, and all Jack needed to do was play the pass. It was a tremendous pass to be able to see it, but it was a fantastic run. And I do agree that with David as well, that they're only in third gear for most of their games. There's plenty more gears left in them, and look at the bench that they have, the strength and depth, like James has talked about as well. So it'll be a fascinating game at Dalymount Park next week. I think Derry UCD as well. I think everyone will expect a home win there, but I think everyone expected a home win last Friday night when Derry took on Shelbourne as well. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, especially now with only one point from 6 this weekend. It'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. And then Dundalk Shelbourne, another tactical battle between 2 very tactical managers with O'Donnell and Duff. And again, Shelbourne's away form being really, really good, and taking on O'Donnell's Dundalk. So yeah, it's going to be a really interesting games coming up this weekend. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll probably head to Inchicore to watch Pats and Finn Harps.
Of course you will. David, just on that note, David, Bohs will have the confidence of scoring 4 goals, while Rovers' confidence has been slowly building over the last few weeks. But as we know, form goes out the window in this one. So how do you see it going?
I'm looking forward to, first of all, I'll be covering the game for RTÉ online. So, well, as much as looking forward to having a bag of chips from the old Bordox, because this is only second time at Dalymount since this season. I think that the win for Bohs yesterday will do them the world of good, just in terms of a bit of the confidence. Like Keith Long spoke about, the negativity that had maybe been around the club a little bit has lifted slightly, but hopefully it bodes well. We talk about form going out the window, but I really hope that Ali Coote, Liam Burt, Chris Twardick, and continue how they build on yesterday, because they were really, really impressive as a front three. Now, I think Junior, or if it's Promise O'Shea, who will start, like, I don't know, it'd be one or the other. Like, even though Junior got his goal, I thought at times where things maybe broke down around him a little bit, but it's just shaping up really well, because as you've mentioned earlier as well, Ed, like, kind of Rovers are beginning to click a little bit. Like, it's one of those games where it just feels like such an occasion. Like the attendances around the league have just maintained even past the first maybe few weeks. It's something that normally happens where even post-COVID and all the rest of it, but it's just been a solid throughout the league, and you always expected that Bohs and Rovers, but it's just one of those games where you go to and it just feels like a proper a proper occasion and a bit of edge to it, and hopefully the quality will match it on the pitch. So really looking forward to that on Friday, and then hopefully when I get home hearing that Pats have won 5-0.
You're hoping, am I getting this right? You're hoping both win, but you're sitting on the fence in terms of predicting the result.
No, I actually don't mind who wins. Like even though, like, yeah, my allegiances might be known to, say, as Conan mentioned it earlier, a good Pats contingent on this podcast at the moment. But it's one of them where you just, when you're out, obviously you switch into work mode when you go to a match, but you just want to see a good game, and that's what you expect. Like, there's so many good players on the pitch going to be on Friday with Bows and Rovers, and you throw in that little bit of edge to it as well, and what's on the line, and it's when the top players and the caliber will shine through, and I think that's what maybe will give Rovers the edge. But why yesterday's performance for Bows was so important was, if that had been a disappointing run, I don't think it would have been too long before crowd could have turned on Bows if things didn't go well. But I think now the game that's in it, it's just primed to be absolutely brilliant. It really is.
Alas, we can hope for a good game, but generally the meetings between the two teams provide pretty poor fare from a footballing perspective. James,
you killed the build-up, Ed. You killed the build-up.
Also as well, Ed, I mean, obviously Derry will be hoping that there's a stalemate or maybe a Bows win, that they can regain that little bit of cushion at the top of the table if, as expected, they beat UCD on Friday as well. And hopefully as well, come Saturday night, Ed, that the pitch up in Sligo is a bit better. I think the weather's getting a bit better now. So hopefully by the time Shamrock Rovers visit on Friday week, that the pitch is in pristine condition.
A bit of Saturday night fever might get Liam Buckley dance on the sideline.
He could be, yeah. He could be channeling his inner John Travolta. So there. So.
Well, on that note, lads, fair play. Thanks very much for joining us, David.
Thanks, Ed.
Conan Byrne and James McMahon. Thanks very much.
Thanks.